Welcome back to That's What I Call Marketing, and you're joining again today for another episode of The Singles. Now, of course, The Singles are our shorter episodes, and it's where we take some of the hot topics in marketing and take a hot take, everyone loves a hot take, of them with the power of Tracksuit data. And I'm going to be joined again from Dan and Jasper from Tracksuit, and of course you know the Tracksuit is the radically affordable, always on brand tracking dashboard. Now, many of us know in our roles in marketing that having our brand data is so important. It gives us a seat at the board level, the C-suite. All those important conversations are happening, but for lots of us it is not affordable, and we would maybe do a dip once a year. Well, what if you found out that there was an always-on brand tracking platform that was affordable, radically affordable? Well, there is now with Tracksuit. So get in touch with the guys at Tracksuit. Go to gotracksuit.com and request a demo, and they will show you the power of the platform and how you can have proper conversations with your leadership team around the metrics that really matter. Before we get into today's episode, if you are enjoying episodes of That's What I Call Marketing and can do us a little bit of a favor, it'll only take a couple of seconds. If you can rate a review, like the episode, subscribe to the podcast, or share with one other person who you think would enjoy this episode, it really does help us build on the engaged community of marketers just like you who really love hearing about marketing, about the hot topics, and about our deep dive conversations that we do every other week as well. So on to today's episode, what are we going to talk about? Well, we are talking about the Elon effect. We are going to talk about bonds in America, and we're going to talk about the Puma rising. Well, to hear what all that is about, let's get right into it with Dan and Jasper from Tracksuit. Dan and Jasper, good to see you again. Thanks a million for joining me on another episode of The Singles. We've got some great topics to talk about today, so we get straight into it. And this is one that has just been in all headlines, not just marketing headlines, but mainstream media news has been Tesla and Elon Musk's impact on the Tesla brand and Tesla sales. And I suppose probably fair to say before we start that, none of us, and we were chatting about this, none of us have any desire to see anyone fail, and none of us have any desire to see, damage or any of that stuff going on. But it's a fair thing to kind of look at, I think, the Elon effect.
Yeah, completely. And I mean, I was reading an interesting article in the New York Times that highlighted how Tesla sales in the US fell almost 9% in the first 3 months of the year, even as the overall electric vehicles category had grown. And I think that's what's quite important to note here is that sales of all electric vehicles in the US rose by 11% during the first quarter to about 300,000 cars and light trucks. And this was according to Cox Automotive, who had quoted that electric vehicle sales continued to grow at a healthy pace in the US market. And then I sort of followed that on from, again, having a look through the BBC and having a look at their take as to what's happening. And again, they had highlighted that Tesla sales had plummeted to the lowest level in 3 years. And this was following backlash against Elon Musk, and that they delivered almost 337,000 electric vehicles in the first 3 months of 25, which was a 13% drop from a year ago.
Yeah, incredible. I mean, it's impossible to ignore as well in terms of just like the publicity they've had over the last 12 months.
Yeah.
But now starting to see how is that translating into their funnel metrics. It really does frame this question of celebrity leadership, because there are so many brands that have innovative founders. If you think of Steve Jobs, Apple, Sir Richard Branson, Virgin, how does their presence impact the brand? And I mean, just looking at our data, so we're looking at 12 months running April 24 to March this year. Tesla's awareness has grown, so 2% to 85%, which is incredibly large. But what we're seeing is that only 25% of those that are aware of the brand will convert to consideration. And comparing that to the category as a whole, where that competitor or category average is 36% awareness to consideration conversion, it's just like it is impossible to ignore that there is this relatability and relevance challenge with Tesla's funnel at the moment, and seeing that flow through right to preference, which has dropped to 6%. So I think you really start to question of, okay, this publicity is starting to really start to drive a leaky funnel for Tesla, and what does that mean for the brand?
Yeah. And it's really interesting, like when you think of it as like it was the category disruptor creator in some ways. Like it really kind of pushed forward. And, you know, I remember like years and years ago, like it was in Amsterdam, all the airport taxis were Teslas. And I was going, this is a Tesla. Like it was, but they were amazing. They were real like futuristic. And it felt like
very innovative.
It felt like a badge of cool, right?
Yeah, completely. But then I think it's also the point of like so innovative, but then if you can't relate, also that old question of like any publicity is good publicity probably doesn't really translate anymore because publicity doesn't mean branding or positive brand. I mean, the perception challenge they have as well, we're starting to see that come through for some of their brand attributes. So Tesla, only 13% think of respondents in the new car category think that Tesla is for people like me. And then probably more concerningly is 15% feel that they have trust in the brand as well. And so for a purchase of the value of it and the low velocity, if you're not building trust, it's pretty foundational to a purchasing decision. How are you supposed to drive consumers through the funnel?
Yeah, completely. And I think just to build back on Dan's point there around their full funnel performance, I think when through our data, we're able to see that only 25% of those who are aware are moving to consideration, which, you know, does sit below the competitor average of 36%. That really does highlight a weakness in translating their brand visibility into intent.
It's amazing, isn't it? Like when you think about awareness, like not all awareness is good awareness. You know what I mean? Like you can have the highest level of awareness, but that's where the data is so powerful because you have to get down to those more meaningful metrics of, you know, preference, usage, trust, like, you know, all that really matters. Because if you just go, you know, into the, let's say the board of Tesla going, oh, look, our awareness has increased 2%. They're like, but our sales haven't.
Yeah.
You know,
I mean, probably too big of a question for this conversation, but then how do you divorce yourself from this situation if you're Tesla? And so how, like, what is the shift? What is the turnaround when you've got these heritage, like long lasting brands like a Toyota that have just built up so much trust, so much relatability?
Yeah.
How do you change that positioning?
Yeah. And I think that will be interesting again to see how and where they do end up shifting their focus from a marketing perspective, because we've talked to it previously and we'll come on to talk to it soon, but how we're seeing brands shift to have a really consumer-centric approach to build that connection and, to Dan's point, to build that trust. I think what will follow now as they look to sort of iron out their bottom line and help to drive that conversion performance will be quite a fascinating journey.
Yeah, and just like in the car category, there's been examples of car brands that have suffered before, like going back a number of years, like Volkswagen had a really bad time and have come back. I guess the difference there is it was the brand, not the there wasn't a person connected to it. I guess, you know, I think probably people got fired and stuff, but like, you know, I think there wasn't that real public facing figure to the brand, and maybe that's where Tesla will struggle with that connection.
Yeah.
Do you think that there will be this like founder-led brand transformation, just as Musk has gone through from this whole, like, Musk was the, you know, the nerdy, innovative founder that no one could trust, and then he started changing how he approached even what he wore to how he showed up in product announcements for Meta. Not saying that he is the masterclass in celebrity leadership or founder leadership, but do you think Musk will undergo something like that?
God, yeah, I mean, the Musk Zuck transformation. Look, I think he probably is going to he's going to have to, but the problem is, will he have people that are going to push him and say that's what you need to do? Because I think, you know, the narrative around him is the fear of firing.
Yeah.
You challenge him, you're like, you're fired.
Yes.
The only other thing I thought of, right, and this is like so random, is there's a lot more Musk parodies in comedy circles now, right? And I sometimes wonder about that, if that softens the edges around it, because it puts him in places and situations that are unrealistic. Like Saturday Night Live do it with Mike Myers, for example, and I've seen loads of others. Does that help? I often wonder, does that help people kind of go, oh, it's just a bit of it, like it's more comedic, and so they make those associations to the comedic pieces that they see. I don't know.
Yeah, it is interesting, but I guess I come back to that point of whilst there's the argument that could build some form of an emotional connection, right? Humor being one of those sort of strings to the bow. I think what it doesn't help, nevertheless, with is this trust piece, which again, obviously, as we've touched on, we know to be critical within the category, and that relatability piece. So I suppose it just comes back into how much of this will help fuel upper funnel activity, but ultimately, will that translate into the bottom funnel work?
Yeah, like so, and it's just so it is. Like, it's such a fascinating thing to watch, and it'll. Yeah, we don't know. This is the great thing.
Yeah.
We've no idea where it could go. Like by the end of today, something can happen. We're like, oh, didn't expect that. So, but it's a great one. Like there's certainly power in, strong, visible, well-known leaders associated with the brand. But like any kind of endorsement, that can just go wrong. And we, there's lots of other examples. You can see, particularly in the celebrity world, where if when they dip, their brand associations or the brands are associated with certainly dip as well. So yeah, an interesting one for us to watch. So, but fascinating how your data is kind of showing a lot of the similarities to actual, even the sales results as well, that Tesla are seeing. So we'll move on to Puma in the UK, and really interested to see how they're kind of stacking up against the competitive set. That is an incredibly competitive marketplace to be in, right? And I don't know, have Puma lost their way a little bit? Are they coming back? What are you guys seeing?
Well, so last month, Puma announced the launch of their biggest global campaign to date, which was the Go Wild campaign launched with Adam and Eve. And essentially the campaign encourages people to unleash their wild energy and celebrates the individual through sport. And interestingly, I was reading an article in Campaign that highlighted that it's Puma's largest marketing investment to date, with a 40% increase in marketing spend compared with 2024. And within this article, Richard Tessier, who's the global vice president of brand and marketing at Puma, he had said that with this campaign, we're taking our first step to further connect with our audience. And what I think is really kind of fascinating when we look at it compared with our data is that we know from the sportswear category in the US that personal relevance is a key driver of conversion in the category, and that our data is showing that within the sportswear category, when consumers feel a brand is for people like me, they're 3.3 times more likely to move from awareness to consideration, and 1.9 times more likely to move from consideration to preference. So currently only 32% of those who are aware of Puma associate the brand with is for people like me, which is one of the lowest in the category, to your point, being extremely competitive. And that's compared to 47% for Nike. So it'll be fascinating to kind of keep track of Puma's brand health with this campaign now live and monitor how it might impact and move the needle on these metrics.
Yeah, like it and I think there's so many pieces to the sportswear category, right? I strongly believe that the advertising, is a huge part of kind of, being seen and being known and connecting with people. But the product itself, do you know what I mean, has to be highly relevant, has to be something that people want to wear and want to be seen in. And so it's really complex, because I think it is kind of that kind of, associations. You want to make associations with the brand because of whatever reasons that, are meaningful to you. So I think it's a huge challenge for them, I think.
Yeah, completely. And I think this is just where insight will play a key role. And Julie Legrand, who's the Senior Director of Global Brand Strategy and Communications at Puma, had said that the campaign was developed with the largest consumer research in the brand's history. And essentially, it was looking to find a clear space in the market for Puma where performance meets joy, which is an untapped territory that Puma is uniquely positioned to own, is how she quoted it. So I think what the hope is really from this work is that the campaign will help strengthen the connection between the brand and personal relevancy, and really help translate Puma's high awareness, which again we touched on, into deeper consumer engagement and movement through the funnel, which will ultimately drive stronger preference over the long term.
Yeah, and where they show up as well is going to be interesting to see, right? What maybe sponsorships or, what other places they show up to bring this brand idea to life is going to be really interesting.
Yeah.
I was going to say that because you see that across the sportswear industries. Like, where do different brands play? Is it performance like Nike? Yeah. Is it more cultural relevance like Adidas? And then how does that translate in terms of the endorsements they make across different sports, across different celebrities? Like, whether that is music, film, to then obviously your sports like your F1s and whatnot. But how does Puma fit into that when Nike's owning performance so much?
Yeah.
And what is your positioning against the Under Armours and the Adidas of the world?
Yeah. And I think it comes back, this I feel like is going to be a red thread throughout a lot of our episodes, but it's just around this emotional connection piece and emotionally driven advertising. Because episode 1, we spoke about Nike's emotional positioning. And obviously now with this campaign launched by Puma, it's all about driving that relevancy directly to the consumer. So rather than almost pitting themselves as the category leader to the point in terms of heroing the product and putting that first and foremost, and whether it's, built with the best in class materials and things like that, it's just more about how can we connect directly with our audience, because ultimately they're who we want to be speaking to and building affinity with.
Yeah, and you mentioned culture, and I was thinking Adidas culture and fashion. I don't know if I mentioned this before, but I probably have in other episodes where I interviewed Mauro Porcini, who's ex-Pepsi. He's now gone to Samsung last year, and he walked into the room like the most effortlessly cool man I've ever met in my entire life. He's tall, and he kind of just glided into the room wearing Adidas, Gucci trousers, shades, scarf. I was like, God. And I was like,
Good.
White pasty. It was in France, and I was like, sweating, and I just looked like an idiot. He looked cool.
That's so good.
It's ridiculous.
That really just made me think that I'm wearing a grey sweater with a grey background. Like, couldn't be less cool. Pretty much just a floating head in a booth when you're talking about someone just gliding into a room.
Effortlessly cool.
Effortlessly,
Yeah.
Might have to do a rethink. Might have to take a book out of
Mauro, yeah. There's no point even trying. I follow him on Instagram. He's just like, oh my God, you're just so cool. And he's nice as well. He's so sound. You're just like, oh. And I expected him to arrive like with an entourage. It was just him, and I'm just like, oh, this is ridiculous. Is it how you wonder you're so successful?
That's brilliant.
Speaking of, I don't know if this is effortlessly cool, but Bonds is like such a wonderful Aussie brand, and I don't know who among the three of us would like to talk about Bonds.
Who wants to take it? I love being described as effortlessly cool. We've gone from sportswear now to underwear. Yeah, I mean, Bonds is just so iconically Australian. Where to begin? In the recent campaign launched by Special, Made for Down Under, was just an incredible way to kickstart their expansion into the US. I mean, before, the way I was thinking about this is, what do we look at from the attributes of Bonds, of why they are such a dominant player in Australia? They have 90% awareness, and then look to translate that to the US, and comparatively, Hanes brand, who also owned by the same owner of Bonds, also have 90% awareness. So like, what are the differences between the two markets? I mean, as with every Australian, whether you're a consumer brand or a person, moving to the US is so shiny in terms of the opportunity, size of market. Yeah. But I think like the starting point is really that campaign where, I mean, synonymous with the underwear brand is having some form of models just lounging around in their underwear, whether you're Calvin Klein or Bonds. Now we've got Robert Irwin as an underwear model. I mean, firstly, I was like, what? Where are we? I've got seeing him as a child around crocodiles with his dad, Steve Irwin, now to this like incredibly ripped underwear model. That is a serious trend.
And so for people who don't know, it's Steve Irwin's son, right?
Yeah, Steve Irwin's
son.
So, Robert Irwin. So, I mean, he's so iconic to Oz, and I think that first step to how does Bonds lean on that Australian heritage to make that jump to the US? I don't think they could have found a better ambassador in Robert Irwin to kind of launch that campaign with. I was reading a written article where he was talking about how do brands lean on their cultural heritage into a new market. And
this is the interesting thing. I think it's fascinating. So what did he have to say?
I mean, he had this phenomenal example of when he was at college in the UK and Budweiser being this like shiny, authentic beer, exciting beer, where Americans were like, does this have this allure in the UK? And I think it's very similar for how Bonds are positioning themselves. Is like, how do you lean on their unique brand perceptions as being Australian-led to be that exotic but very authentic new brand in a category that is so heavily commoditized. I mean,
Yeah.
you got to lean on comfy, you've got to lean on product, and then it's really like, what is that distinctiveness or that differentiation as a brand entering a new market?
Yeah. And I think just very quickly build on that. And I think it's also doing so in such an unapologetic way. And one of the things we again spoke to last week was, for example, with Yorkshire Tea, the work with Lucky Generals in terms of really leaning into that DNA and that cultural heritage piece. And this campaign, again, as Dan mentioned, Made for Down Under, launched with Special, is absolutely brilliant in doing exactly that. And I think when you have that positioned and framed as part of your marketing and your go-to-market strategy, you know, we're seeing some of the key verbatim themes that are coming through, Australian being one of the largest of those, which is really suggesting that strong national identity tied to the brand and ultimately achieving what they're setting out to do, which is just bringing names like, you know, Robert Irwin, and Irwin is just, there's so much iconicity to that name, and bringing that and sewing that within their activity is brilliant.
And not doing it in a way that is like, maybe twee is the wrong word, but like, you know, it's not old fashioned. It's not like, do you know what I mean? It feels really relevant, really of now. There are great, you know, Aussie bits in it, you know what I mean? Like the crocodile in the shot, like, you know what I mean? But it doesn't feel, I don't know, it feels kind of authentic. Like if it was Irish, you know, there was a leprechaun, you'd be like, oh, for God's sake.
Yeah, yeah.
You know what I mean? There's none of that kind of ridiculousness in
Yeah,
it.
it was very casual, but as in
Confident.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it doesn't lean into the stereotypes.
No,
There's the word.
It's just exactly. It's just really distinctive, very Bonds.
Yeah.
And it almost feels like this maturity play of like taking on like Robert Irwin, who is now this adult, this man, and also Bond's like maturity to now be launching into the largest, most alluring market that is the US. It just felt like it ticked every possible box. But I mean, the interesting thing for underwear as a category is like, how do you actually stand out? Like, you can't just roll in being the Australian underwear brand. Like, what is actually the tactic that you go after?
Yeah.
I think what we've seen from why Bonds have been so successful in Oz is that 59% of Australians feel that Bonds is, you know, value for money, sitting in that affordable premium space, whereas Hanes in the US, only 20% of respondents have that view and they actually think that it's worth paying more for. So there is this opportunity or perception, like essentially attribute to go after around being that affordable but premium player in the market.
Yeah.
So it'll be interesting to see how they target that segment.
Yeah, it's really interesting. It's that affordable but good quality. So how do you, like, where's your positioning in that? Like, it's such an interesting thing. The other thing I thought about as well was, I might go back to our first topic a little bit, but was the timing of it. And I was wondering, oh my gosh, because literally as that was all happening, there was all the conversations around tariffs and all that kind of stuff. And I was like, oh my God, like, you know, and that's really interesting as a marketer, because this obviously was a freight train, right? Like there was no stopping this. The dates were set, and you can't, I'm sorry, even as a business, not just a marketer, but you can't account for things that might happen in global economy, global politics. And so the fact, I think, that they, you know, they didn't pull back, or it doesn't seem like they have. They've gone, no, we're going again. To me, it's just a very confident play from a brand that feels they have a right to play in that market. And I guess there's going to be probably spillover into other markets. I don't know their presence in other markets, but you'd imagine, you know, crack this, you know, it's going to help them. You know, they might have massive global plans. I don't know, but it's an incredible brand, and it's just that the fact that it's so, I guess, embedded in Aussie culture, right? And so they can lean into that. And, you know, as you said, like the world used to be used to US culture being the thing that was what we all wanted. And maybe, you know, it's the time for something else, right?
Yeah, completely. I mean, it will be interesting to see how they do run that launch in terms of just like product set, like lent heavily on underwear in the campaign, but have everything across the board, whether it is like baby swaddles and all the various products they own. So it'd be interesting to see how they do launch. I mean, launching directly through Amazon is an interesting play as well.
Yeah.
Hopefully we'll be seeing more of Robert Irwin over this side of the pond.
Whose WhatsApp group wasn't blowing up? How ripped is Robert Irwin?
And the other thing I think I have to talk about is, you know, a special group are fantastic, right? Like their work is just so good. I was chatting to Rory Gallery from New Zealand. Well, he's obviously Irish, but he's based there last week. And, you know, just the work they seem to consistently put out is just world class, and just their growth is phenomenal. I'm a huge fan of them and their work, right? And they kind of have that idea of kind of wanting to do something special. I just love that.
No, absolutely. I was fortunate to see him speak at the APG Creative Strategy Awards launch earlier this year, as he was behind an APG award-winning paper. And he's absolutely brilliant. And to your point, I mean, the special group and what they are achieving and launching down in ANZ and down in that part of the world is phenomenal. And obviously special, of course, being over this side as well, and the work that they're doing and releasing, and you're seeing a lot of with their new business wins, etc. The momentum that they're driving is exceptional.
Yeah, no, it is. It's great. It's great. Well, listen, guys, thanks a million. Great to catch up and go through your hot takes on hot topics in marketing and, you know, hot models and all the rest.
Conor, we didn't even get to cover the main topic of the week. Rory McIlroy bringing it for the Irish.
I know, and that was God, he put us through the ringer like for 11 years. And he's just like, it's a fascinating thing, you know. I don't know if you heard the quote, or not the quote, but that he was interviewed. He obviously been interviewed a lot, but his caddy, who's like his best friend growing up, and, you know, going into the playoff, you know, trying to get him refocused on that playoff holes, and said to him, you know, if I'd offered you this last weekend, would you have taken it? And he said, yes.
Yeah.
And like, just that mental fortitude and strength and ability to do it. Yeah, no, it was great. Everyone's delighted for him. And the funny thing is, like, out of all of it, everyone's like, but wasn't Shane Lowry brilliant the way he gave him the big hug? Yeah. People still, for some reason, everyone just like adores Shane Lowry. People love McIlroy and really happy for him. Like Grand Slam, like it's, you know, I read something like, you know, anyway, that's like one of the biggest sporting occasions for this country ever, but people still talk more about Shane Lowry.
Sportsmanship was the real winner.
Yeah, there you go. With Justin Rose as well. He was sportsmanship as well. I thought that was great. Maybe less so Bryson.
Yes,
yeah.
A Puma athlete as well.
Oh, okay, well there you go. Maybe that. I'll say no more. Listen, thanks a million, guys. Great to get through those topics. And I've said as well to people, like, if the stuff people want to hear us talk about, you know, relevant topics, drop any of us a note. We're all on LinkedIn. I'll put links in the show notes, because again, we have the power of the Tracksuit data. We can dig into these things. It's not just us waffling on. There is a bit of that, but it's actually powered by data, which is brilliant. So we're able to kind of see the truth behind the stories as well, which is wonderful. So thanks a million, guys. We'll catch up again.
Thanks, Conor.
Cheers. Well, I hope you enjoyed that episode of The Singles with Dan and Jasper at Tracksuit. And remember, if you are interested in getting your hands on a radically affordable, always-on brand tracking platform, well, you can. Just go to gotracksuit.com, and the guys there will show you the power of their platform and how you can have metrics that matter to your hand all the time. We'll be back next week with another longer episode of That's What I Call Marketing, a deep dive with an amazing global CMO. So I'm really looking forward to that one. But in the meantime, if you have enjoyed this episode, and you can rate or review, like or subscribe, or share the episode with one other person, it would be it would really be appreciated, because that is honestly one way that we can help grow on this amazing community of marketers just like you. So I appreciate all the people that have done that, and if you can do that for me today, I would be extremely grateful. So from me, Conor Byrne, your host, until the next episode, thank you so much for tuning in. Take care.